another edition of the new ND Nation Radio.
We're going inside them. We're going outside them. Inside them and outside them. And when we get them on a run once, we're going to keep them on a run.
And Notre Dame, as number one goes down, Syracuse undefeated no more.
This is now top-notch college hockey.
Everything here at Notre Dame has been done on faith and a commitment to excellence. You are Notre Dame. You are special.
You were to impart some wisdom or some tips on the guys coming in.
I would probably say stay on top of your academics.
North County broke free at the 30, 35, 40. The Rocket is trying to do it again.
And you're also going to walk out of here with a degree from the University of Notre Dame. In this lifetime, you don't have to prove nothing to nobody except yourself.
You know, this play like a champion sign, Rocket Ishmael's touched many times. Jerome Bettis has touched many times. You know, the best stadium you play in, I'm going to say Notre Dame.
We're going to get them on a run. We're going to go, 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 go. And we aren't going to stop until we go to that goal line. Don't forget, man, today's the day we're going to win.
All right, guys, it's time to welcome our third guest for the evening. Let's do a little March Madness roundtable for Notre Dame, talking men's and women's basketball with our lovely guest. This guy is the media director for the University of Notre Dame. You hear him every Thursday on Mike Bray and Brian Kelly's radio show. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Jack Nolan to the new ND Nation Radio. Jack, thank you for joining us. I know we had a lot of time trying to plan out this date and get you on here, so we're finally glad to have you on.
Well, because, you know, the bids come out late, you don't know what the schedule is, and we're doing more and more stuff on UND.com and tweeting and Facebooking and everything. I wasn't quite sure when I'd be free, but I'm free, and I'm glad to do it.
So how's your bracket looking so far? I know there haven't been any big upsets, but it's been kind of a crazy day regardless.
No, there have been no upsets. My brackets are fine because a few years ago I stopped filling them out. Because, A, I'm too busy, and you always get beaten by the secretary or your neighbor's friend or somebody who picked it by colors. So I just sit back and watch and really focus on what Notre Dame is facing and what they need to do to win.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's start with the women, actually. They get a 1 seed regardless of the unfortunate loss against Connecticut in the championship game. They play this Sunday. They go on to face the winner of Cal and Iowa. What are your thoughts on the game? Not just Skylar Diggs for getting Big East Player of the Year, but how much this team just continued to grow throughout the season?
I think they had a terrific year, and they met virtually all challenges. They went through one little segment where they weren't playing as well as they wanted to play, and they knew it, and finally lost to West Virginia, which it didn't really wake them up, but it kind of shook them a little bit because they felt they deserved to lose the game, and actually thought they had won some games maybe they didn't deserve to win because they weren't playing to the utmost of their ability, and they got right back on track. And, you know, I think they have a tremendous shot at the national championship. I do not think UConn will beat them again after what happened in the Big East championship game. And I think it's going to come down to do you get by Baylor? Because Griner is just I'm trying to say, I mean, I have terms that some people might say would be insulting. I don't mean it that way. But she's definitely a phenom. I don't think there's ever been a women's basketball player like Brittany Griner. And if she doesn't get in foul trouble, it's going to be tough to beat. But beyond that, I think they have a great shot at it this year. I really do.
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, phenom is probably the best word to use there.
Well, you know, some of the words that we all use sitting around talking sports privately that you mean complimentarily, but anything that's going to be podcasted on the internet, you have to pick your words carefully. So I call it
the truth.
Yeah.
You know, she's Griner's. You know, she's a lot like Dolson from UConn in the fact that she can kind of take over a game, but even more so than Dolson. And I think you're right. If we can contain, if we get to Baylor and meet them again and contain her and really, you know, that's the one thing Notre Dame women's basketball has been known for this season is dominating defenses. and just really keeping points on the board for other teams. You know, if we can keep, what do you think the key is? Is it Devereaux Peters who really needs to handle her in that game if that's how it comes up?
Well, I think Devereaux's a key, but I think Notre Dame has already proven to this point in the season that they're much more than just a one-person team. I think that they're at a point where they can have a player who might struggle and still be able to do quite well. But I think certainly Devereaux would have to be a key in that game, and there's no doubt about that.
Let's talk a little more about the, talk about Liberty a little bit. A lot of people, obviously, being a 16 seed, they're not going to have the recognition that Notre Dame's going to have, or the other teams in their region. Being around the team, do you know how they're getting prepared for this game exactly? The tips and their strategy for this game. Obviously, it's a 16-1 game, but in the tournament, you got to be ready for anything.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I haven't been around a lot because I'm focused so much on the men's team. And I don't go to their practices, so it's tough for me to answer that question.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit then the Xavier game coming up. This is we've got a little insight from Monk Malloy on it, but this is a tough game for them. This is, I would call Xavier probably the streakiest team in all of college basketball because they had that stretch where they were the 5th team in the nation. Then they have the unfortunate scene with the brawl, but then they have a little slump. But they come back, they go back and forth from that time. It's a tough game for Notre Dame just because of Tu Holloway. Tu is an impressive basketball player. I know I've said this quite a few times, but he's a guy you've got to pretty much game plan for. And then they have a guy like Kenny Freeze. For being around the boys at practice, obviously giving away the game plan, how can you see them preparing for this game?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it's about the team wears T-shirts. Some of them do in practice. They had them made up. Do what we do. It is something that Mike Bray has talked about a lot. What this team wants to do first and foremost is get back into that offensive rhythm that they were in a great deal through that winning streak that they kind of got out of off and on over the last 4 or 5 games. As you know, they tripped up a little bit in that 2-game road trip that I knew was going to be an issue for them just because you're at St. John's, a very young athletic team in a building where they hadn't shot well, and they didn't shoot well in that game. And then Georgetown's playing better and better, and that just wasn't a good matchup for them. They got back into that rhythm a little bit against Providence, played very well in terms of controlling the tempo against the South Florida team that looked pretty darn good last night, and then fell out of it again against Louisville, but Louisville played extremely well with a typical end-of-season Rick Pitino defense. So I think they're working on getting their offensive rhythm back to the level where they know they need to be in terms of executing well on that end, and then continue to play very hard on defense. In the lane, you want to prevent Holloway and Lyons from indiscriminately penetrating while also watching out for their three-point shooting, particularly Lyons. You can't let Kenny Freeze, who Notre Dame recruited, just set up in the paint without trying to push him away from the spot where he wants to be. You can beat Kenny Freeze up and down the floor, and I think they will try to get him running. But Xavier's also got a freshman named Des Wells, who's an outstanding athlete. He's not that tall, but he's strong and physical and a good rebounder. And they've got some guys coming off the bench. They have 10 players who average 10-plus minutes a game. And I'm concerned with a couple of them, Justin Martin and Jeff Robinson. Martin's a 6'6", 205-pound freshman forward out of Indianapolis, and Robinson's also out of Indy, 6'10", 225-pounder. Those guys come in and give them very, very good minutes up front. So it's continuing to do what you do in terms of controlling the tempo and defending, but getting back into the offensive rhythm that won you so many games this year.
And the region that they're in, they have to have some sort of tempo. I mean, for those watching the game right now, Kentucky is just taking it to Western Kentucky. And obviously, if Notre Dame does advance in this game, it looks like more than likely they will play the Duke Blue Devils. Baylor's a little bit struggle against San Diego State, but they're a really good team. How did they feel when they saw the region? Was it more of excited to be there and prepare for a good game, or was it, man, we have a tough road ahead of us?
Oh, they're very happy to be in the tournament, and they wanted the next challenge. I was with them when they saw the announcement. There were smiles, and they thought it was a good matchup, and they're excited. I mean, they don't and they realize they can't look past Xavier. I think Xavier is a little underseeded because Xavier underachieved this year. I think Notre Dame's probably where they should be, other than probably maybe a little higher because Notre Dame did overachieve, but I think on paper, talent-wise, about a 7 seed is where Notre Dame should be. They think this is a good game, and anytime you get a chance to play one of the marquee teams, you get excited about that. Would you like to not have to face a Duke or a Carolina or somebody like that in your second-round game? Yeah, probably. But none of the players have expressed that. They just want a chance to play. And I do think that this Notre Dame team could beat Duke. Watch Duke at the practice session today. That said, it's going to be awfully hard to beat a Duke in the state of North Carolina. But you just want to get through Xavier first.
Hey, Jack, going back to the Selection Sunday, I was actually fortunate enough to Tim O'Connor actually invited me to and our group to sit in on the Google Plus hangout that they had, and so we got to. I know you came over and spoke to everyone for a little bit. I grew up in the South Bend area and worked in local sports media for when it was Fox 28. So I've listened to you for years and seen you and everything else. And so to put it loosely, you're an not old time, but I mean you're old school television radio guy.
What do you mean by old school? I'm interested.
Well, you've been around. You've been around way before there was any social media, things like that. The way the media works now with the 24-hour news cycle and everything like that. And
when I started, you edited film. You actually cut it and glued it together, and you typed up your scripts on 5 carbon paper with 5 copies. You then taped them all back to back and ran them on a conveyor belt into the teleprompter, which was a camera that actually put those scripts on the screen in front of the lens. So, yeah, I've been around for a little while.
Well, how was it? How did you? Now, you're really active on Twitter and Facebook and everything now. And how is that for you? I mean, do you find it to be a viable way to get word out and to talk about sports and everything else, especially with Notre Dame? But is that something that you enjoy doing, or is it, did it take you a while to get used to that concept?
Well, it took me a while to get used to it, I think Twitter and Facebook and the Internet can be dangerous in some ways. And, you guys probably know, if you know Oak, he's now in my office, so he's really been pushing me to do this. I enjoy it. I think Twitter is fast overtaking Facebook, and now that I'm on Twitter, I think Twitter is the best avenue now for breaking news. I think you've got to be able to filter things, but I now subscribe to various folks. I'm finding some of the stuff that Jay Billis puts out there to be fascinating, and I'm surprised how hard-edged he is. Now, you can do that when you're at the place that basically controls sports now, which is ESPN. I enjoy doing it. I tweeted some photos today from Notre Dame's practice, including a photo of Garrett Sherman, who actually drove from South Bend so that he could practice with the team today. He can't stay with the team. He can't even go in the locker room. More of these brilliant NCAA rules. So he basically had to dress somewhere else and then come out of the stand, but he can practice with the team. As you can tell, I think that's another silly, it's just silly. And now if something happens to the kid, he's part of the team, he practices at home, something happens, and it's, whose fault is that going to be? But he has to not be there. But he drove all the way. I enjoy that kind of stuff. But because I also kind of represent the university, I'm not going to get real edgy. And I think what a lot of athletes are discovering now is what I understand is everything I put out there is public. It's like going outside and yelling, and anybody who hears it, hears it. A lot of the younger generation believes this is a private conversation, and they have First Amendment rights and all these things. And they don't realize that some of the stuff that they put out there could come back to haunt them. So would I tweet? I, in all honesty, try to tweet somewhat cautiously.
Sure.
I've got Oak to promise not to tweet everything I might say in the office in casual conversation, because he wants to tweet almost everything that he hears. And, there's stuff for public consumption and stuff for private consumption. But I enjoy it, and I've become a fan of Twitter and understand its redeeming value, but I also understand how it can be real dangerous. And then one thing I wish, and this was with an email too, I wish there was a retract button where not only can you pull it back, but everybody has to forget it. Like the Men in Black, that little thing they can flash at you and you forget everything. There should be an ability to pull all that stuff back. But no, I found it interesting, and I do know it's bad news for newspapers. I now subscribe to enough reporters that I can read everything that I want to read right off my iPhone. I don't have to buy a newspaper. Now, I still do because I'm old, and that's what we do. Us old folks read newspapers every day because we don't feel informed if we don't. But more and more, I wouldn't have to, and I'm still waiting to have newspapers figure out how to make that economic model work, giving away their stuff and still finding enough to pay the people to write it.
Exactly. And I don't want to get off the subject of basketball because obviously that's, during this time, that's why we really wanted to have you on. But, as I said, I've followed you for many years when you were with WNDU and, and you had your show on WNDU AM and all that. But now, now you're with Notre Dame Sports Properties. You do the Mike Bray show, you do the Brian Kelly show, you do the play-by-play. I mean, you wear so many hats with Notre Dame Sports Properties. Is this where you really, and for me being local, if it was me, I would, my ultimate goal would want to be in the university in the same fashion that you are. Is this kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, is this a dream job for you at this point in your career?
Oh, absolutely, because it also, one of the things that I find tough about the everyday media is there's a lot of folks out there who mistake negativity for objectivity. And obviously things will go wrong. People will make mistakes. And even in the old days, even at WNDU, even though we were owned by the university, it was a very fine line. The university always wanted to say, we don't want to influence what you report. But then on the other hand, well, you're our station. And our management would say, well, we should do this because we're Notre Dame Station. We should get all these advantages. But then bad stuff would happen, and you'd be pressured to report it. And you try to explain, well, I can report that. But next week when you want me to go to Coach X or Player X and get them on live, they're not going to do it. And people would say, well, if you do it right. I said, no. There's no way to either say something negative or report negative news and have people be happy about it. Nobody understands that. Well, now when that happens, I can let other people worry about that. I'm not saying that I sugarcoat stuff, but I don't have to go digging for stuff where the rest of the world kind of has to. And so I really do enjoy that aspect of it. And as you probably remember, I did a lot of news. The last 10, 12 years I was at WNDU, I kind of filled in for everybody anchor-wise. And probably the biggest job I had was Saturday morning. I did 3-hour newscasts, and I really liked anchoring news. If I was going to stay in sportscasting, I want to be the voice of the team, and I'm allowed to do that now. I'm in a place that I have tremendous respect for the way they do things and the kind of people and the kind of student-athletes who are here, and I enjoy being around them and reporting on them. Because the funny thing is, the older that you get, the more perspective you get, and in some ways, the less important every game becomes, because you realize that, I know this is blasphemy for some Notre Dame fans, in the big picture, when that final white light is shining and you look back over your life, there aren't going to be a whole lot of games that were that important. There might be some, but there's still games. So that's why I kind of lean sometimes to the news aspect of it, too, because that does affect more people sometimes in the daily life. But you also understand how important Notre Dame is to so many people. And because they do things the right way, and turn out student-athletes that, even though they may not get to a BCS football game every year, or they may not get to the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16 on a frequent basis, when they come back in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they're all successful. They're all doing so well as doctors, attorneys, the heads of nonprofits, teachers, or just very productive community leaders in their lives, or just average Joes who spend a lot of their time doing good things, giving back to the community. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be able to do what I do and do it around people who are just such quality class people. So, it's almost the perfect job for what I want to do at this point in my career.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and we talk about it every week. We've been blessed with what we do, and have had Golden Tate and Brady Quinn and Tim Brown and guys like that. And you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. These guys are, you can always count on them to be doing something in the community or across the country that benefits other people. So yeah, that's definitely one of those things that makes Notre Dame, a special place, especially, for all of us on the show and at the New Indy Nation, but, everybody out there who follows Notre Dame. It's what makes Notre Dame Notre Dame. And, I don't think any of us would even consider having it any other way.
No, and it extends across all the sports. And I will admit, you could probably tell, you caught me a little off guard, starting with the women's team. And I don't want to give anybody the impression that I don't pay attention. It's just the last few weeks, between the TV shows and the traveling and the Big East tournament, I haven't been around them that much. But somebody we didn't mention who is a huge key to this team is Natalie Novosel. So when you're asking me about, what's the key to this, I mean, Natalie, with her maturity, her leadership on the floor, she can take over games. Skylar is just, phenomenal. She's probably, it should be, well, Griner's probably going to get National Player of the Year, but she should be in the Final Four. She is. But even Skylar herself will admit sometimes her emotions are such an important part of her game, but she's still working on channeling them to perfection each and every game. Natalie Novosel is incredibly important to this team. And I actually had a chance to do one of their games for the Big East Network in 2003 or 2004 against BC, and I really enjoyed doing that game and actually kind of hoped that there might be more opportunities to do more in that area, and it never came up. Now, you can't have the same person announce both teams anymore because you play too many nights at the same time. But, I think they've got a great shot again to get to the Final Four. And if I might be so bold, I'm sure Chris Masters or Bob Nagel would be an interesting guest for you at some point, guys who are around them all the time, just like I'm around the men all the time.
Yeah, definitely. I've had the pleasure of working with Chris Masters a little bit. So, yeah, that's definitely somebody we'll try to get on the show.
And actually, give me a heads up next time, and I'll be better prepared right from the beginning. Go ahead.
Steve, this is in TV capacity for 30 years, and you're talking to a couple guys. We've got a radio show going on. What is your advice when you talk to young people in the media when everything's? What are you trying to bestow upon them?
All right, because you were breaking up there for some reason, but I think just basically, what advice do I have to people who are kind of starting out just to do a sports radio show? I think what I found is you kind of have to be yourself. For whatever reason, because I've used the phrase "got it" for years, and I think the reason is Notre Dame has played so many exciting games and overachieved and really captured the hearts and minds of Notre Dame fans everywhere with their very unlikely 9-game winning streak and a third straight trip to the NCAA this year. But by yelling the way I yell "got it" or "yes," what you're hearing is true emotion, because I know all the people on this team, all the players, I know the coaches, and I do have an emotional vested interest in them. That's not to say that I'm not subjectively objective. I'm still going to be as honest as I can, but I'm not afraid to let you know who I want to win the game. I think being yourself as a broadcaster in news or sports, and there's more room for it in sports because you can be more personal and show more personality. You don't have to be as objective on the sports side, but trying to be yourself is what you really need to be, because it's quite honestly too hard to try to be something that you're not. That's work. If you try to be yourself, then you can just do that each and every night. If you're going to do an interview show, you need to be curious. One of the adjustments that I've made at this point, and when you first start out in the business, when you're talking to somebody like a famous coach or a player, you often want to prove that you've done your homework and that you know what you're talking about. So you almost answer your questions with your question by giving so much detail. You put so much detail in the question, there's really not much more for the person you're asking the question to say. Now, there's a pressure to do that because you're trying to show your own bosses. And if you ask wide-open questions, sometimes they say, well, this guy really doesn't know what he's talking about. But I often ask questions now that I know the answer to, because I can give you the answer, but I may not have played. I mean, I will ask Jordan or Sean Carney or LaFonso Ellis a question during a game, but after 30 years, yeah, I kind of know the answer, but I didn't play 11 years in the NBA. I'm not the all-time leading shot blocker in Notre Dame history. I haven't had a 30-year coaching career. And even if the same answer comes from me or from them, I would hope after all this time for a true Notre Dame fan, if it comes from me, it means something. It has some credibility. But it certainly means more when it comes from someone who has not only done whatever I've asked them about, but someone that Notre Dame fans greatly respect and admire. So you have to get to the point where you're comfortable enough in your own skin and your own ability to ask questions that may make it look like you don't know the answer and not worry about that, because you will get a better answer from the person you're interviewing, and that ultimately is the goal. But it takes a while to get that confident and also to get the people to understand what you're trying to do. But I used to ridicule Larry King because he would say, not ridicule, but I would chuckle when he'd say, I don't prepare for interviews. And he said this way back when he was on radio and I was getting out of college before he'd even become a star at CNN, that he thought he did better interviews because he was like the person at home. He didn't know anything about who he was talking about, so he would kind of ask the questions that they would ask. Now, I would say you got to take it a little farther than that. You have to do some background, and you have to know about the person you're interviewing, but then you have to know how to pose the question, to pose the kinds of questions people at home would be listening to. But I get what he was saying now, and I do think he had the greatest job around, because a lot of times he said, I didn't prepare for this. He got to talk to interesting people every night, and they paid him lots and lots of money. I mean, the good thing about money, people, is money's freedom. It's not necessarily getting a lot of fancy stuff, but it gives you the freedom to do what you want with your life, and, of course, the freedom to take care of your family. And those are the two, I think, highest things that you can try to aspire to with a job.
Well, I'm going to test out your advice. I'm going to chop this question right in half of what I was going to ask you previously. Jack, what is the second biggest storyline? And I'm not going to lead you into it. What is the second biggest storyline in Notre Dame spring ball this year?
Oh, so
for you
don't want me to talk. You don't want me to talk about the quarterbacks.
Yeah, we'll take it with that. That's what I'm trying to lead away from.
Oh, wow. Second biggest storyline. Well, I mean, it's still offense, because I think defense is going to continue to get better and better. Now, I'm sure you've already touched on the T. Shepard situation today, which, again, at this time of year, I'm with basketball, and Tuesday I'll be in that press conference with Coach Kelly, and we'll start our extensive daily coverage again on UND.com. But I didn't see that coming. I've talked to a few people that have heard some rumblings. I still don't know why it happened. It's disappointing. So now your secondary, especially at the corner position, lacks some depth. But overall, I think the defense is going to continue to make strides. I think not just quarterbacks, but the offense as a whole at the skill positions. You have got to find guys that you can slot in all the key positions on this spread offense, get them reps, and get them running as a well-tuned machine. I think that you want to come out of the spring feeling very comfortable that you can run, or feeling comfortable that by the time you get on that plane to fly to Dublin, that this offense is going to be able to not only be productive, because it's already been very productive under Brian Kelly, but that it can start to approach the tempo at which he wants to run this offense. I have seen it run that way in practice on a number of occasions, and we've seen it a number of times. For example, the Wake Forest game, some of the drives in that game, when they are running and not letting the defense even reset, it's a very difficult offense to stop. And I think that's something that they've got to be looking at in the spring. And obviously the huge headline is going to be, who is the quarterback coming out of spring? And we even had a staff meeting the other day, and somebody said, well, certainly he's going to name a starter coming out of the spring. I'm not so sure he is. I'm not so sure he can. I'm not sure 15 practices is enough to make a decision that is as important as that, unless nobody challenges Tommy Rees for the job.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there, and I agree that the offense is definitely a huge question mark. And we're just going to hope that you're going to be covering men's basketball for long into the springtime. So that was my biggest question. If you guys want to jump back in here, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say, one thing that was announced today, we talked obviously there, the night game against Michigan this year, we're going to have another one at Notre Dame Stadium. It was funny because Reverend Beloit said that he was all for 1:30 games every week, and we actually were talking about how I think it's a great thing for the university to have these night games. What are your thoughts on the 7:30 night game, and how do you feel it adds to the atmosphere of Notre Dame?
Well, I mean, selfishly, I kind of like the 1:30 games. But in terms of kids today, primetime television, the night atmosphere at Notre Dame is better. And everyone involved with the USC game this past year did an outstanding job. The adult fans, the locals, the ones from out of town, the students, there was energy there. There was an excitement. There was a buzz. People behaved. Certainly people in the parking lots were having their favorite beverage, but I think, most folks cut it off. As a matter of fact, in going out to do the pregame radio show on the IMG radio network, I noticed some people looked like they were almost napping. They had stopped and were getting their energy back for the game, but were stopping at a point where they would still be functioning at the game. And believe me, unless you're in training as an SEC fan where you're used to drinking from 9 a.m. until the 7 o'clock kickoff, that was a very good choice on the part of many, many people. So, I mean, I understand why they're doing it. I think they need to do it. I think it really does increase the atmosphere there. I think the players like being in prime time. It gives the program even more exposure. And you're thinking, well, this is Notre Dame. We don't need more exposure. What I think a lot of folks lose track of is the way things have always been done at Notre Dame, and this goes to the Jumbotron as well, and there's what the guys you were trying to get to come to school to play here today want. They're 18 years old. None of them were even close to being alive the last time Notre Dame won a national championship. And, in fact, I'm not sure anybody being recruited today was alive the last time Notre Dame contended for the national championship, which would be back in '93. So you have to start doing some things that are attractive to people of the newest generation today who did not necessarily grow up knowing what a great football tradition that Notre Dame has had. If you're 18 years old, let's be honest, Notre Dame has been on the radar because they're that school that does okay each year that's for some reasons on national TV every week. They don't have the same understanding and love and expectations for the program that we do. So I don't have an issue with a night game. I'm not even sure that I even want to touch the hot potato about shifting them all to night games. I don't think Notre Dame would ever allow that to happen, quite honestly. And I'll tell you, from a business owner perspective, they don't like night games. And not that should influence the decision, but I know there's grumbling from the business community. They'd much rather have it at 1:30. Then they get you for breakfast and they get you for dinner. And these are all these kinds of things that enter into sports decisions. And certainly Notre Dame is a great economic driver for the South Bend, Mishawaka, southwestern Michigan area. It's the same reason, because I had some discussions with folks from Connecticut. People wonder why they play at the XL Center. They play a lot of their games in Hartford because the governor basically wants them to, as an economic driver for the city of Hartford. Given their druthers, Connecticut would rather play all of their games in stores. They think the atmosphere is better, and they think it's worth about 5 points a game. So, what seems like a simple question a lot of times, guys, isn't. But I don't have an issue with it. I think if one game a year, and this year they'll have 2 in prime time on NBC. I would imagine a number of the other ones on the other networks will be in prime time. So that's good exposure all the way around. But I thought it was a plus. I don't know if everybody online here was able to be at the USC game, but I thought the atmosphere was terrific.
Yeah, it was. I had a blast there. I'll get you out with this last question. Another big storyline was announced today from Brian Harden is Amir Carlisle, the transfer from USC. He does get the waiver. He is deemed eligible to participate for the season. Where do you see him fitting in this first year? Is he a guy that's going to be competing with guys like Roberson, McDaniel, and Atkinson to be that second back? Or do you think it's really his job for the taking?
Well, again, I think Ron Kelly has legitimate competitions. I think they will all be given an equal chance to win it. I think he's going to be on the field. I think everybody who's healthy is going to end up on the field. But I think that's one of the great things about Brian's spread offense. You can move these guys over to the slot. I think the fact that you now got Tony Alford, who is coaching both the slot receivers and the running backs, that's going to be one big group. And whoever can handle the ball both when they get it by handoff or get it by pass, those are the guys that are going to see the field. And I think you've got at least 3 slots right there, maybe 4, that can go too deep. So I don't think they're going to run into a situation where they have too many bodies and not enough time. And I don't think it's the kind of offense where you necessarily just ride one or two guys for the whole game. I think they'll spread it out and they'll all get a chance. But obviously, Carlisle, heck of a player. He wasn't dominant at USC, but he had some very good games. And he comes in with the best pedigree of the guys you just mentioned. So I'm certainly think he's going to see the field, but I don't think it's automatically his. That said, they didn't apply for the waiver and fight for it so hard without the intention of having him on the field.
That's another way we talk about a simple question can be a lot more difficult than you can asked. Well, Jack, it was great to have you on and talk a little basketball, to get her touched on the spring football coming up. Before we let you go, we like to give our guests a chance to really talk and get their name out there as far as social networking, Facebook and Twitter. So if anyone wants to get in contact with Jack Nolan, what's the best way to do that?
Jack at ndsportsproperties.com is the best way to get in touch with me. That's Jack at ndsportsproperties.com. And one more thing, because I always want to give you complete answers, and I thought about it, and then we moved on to another topic. But you were talking about Brittany Griner, right?
Yes, sir.
Natalie Achanwa will be a key in that game along with Devereaux Peters.
Natalie, she's I've been following her. She actually friended us when we first started up and has been a big supporter, but she's going to turn out to be an incredible athlete for the women's program, I think, and I think you hit the nail on the head. She, obviously with the unfortunate injury early on, but, getting her back in, and it's great to see her play, and she's been more productive as the season moved on. I think she's really getting more comfortable, in game situations. I think you're exactly right. She's going to be a big key.
Absolutely. Guys, I enjoyed it. Be glad to come on again. I mean, when you gave me the guest lineup, I'm like, you really want to spoil that show with me? But honored that I was able to join such an august lineup. The few times I've had a chance to sit down and talk with Monk, he is a fascinating guy, and he loves basketball.
Yeah, we definitely got a good talking with there with basketball.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, Jack, to a lot of us who haven't lived in South Bend and live around the country. You've been, our guy, our inside information guy on the TV show, and it's just a joy to have you on. And if you want to come back, you're always welcome back. We hope to have you again on sometime soon.
No, just give me a call. We'll set it up.
Will do.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Jack.
I'm sorry. We're on the internet.
Jack.
Email me or tweet me, right? That's we don't use phones that much anymore. All right, guys. Thank you. Go Irish.
Go Irish.
Go Irish.